start with a story that we may all be familiar with. Once a dominant force in the video rental industry, Blockbuster failed to adapt to emerging digital trends like streaming services, despite opportunities to pivot, including an early chance to buy Netflix. Blockbuster remained focused on its traditional model. This led to its eventual bankruptcy in 2010 under a 900 million debt burden, while Netflix thrived as a digital entertainment giant. This is not just a one-off episode. More than 52% of companies on the Fortune 500 list have disappeared from that list since the year 2000. This is because the game has changed and we all need to learn the rules of the new game, that too rapidly. Deloitte reports that organizations with strong learning cultures are 92% more likely to innovate and respond effectively to changes. Indeed, continuous learning ensures employees stay relevant as industries transform. Hello, everyone. This is Rajiv Jayaraman, the founder and CEO of KNOLSKAPE, and I welcome all of you to another episode of the Learning Curve powered by KNOLSKAPE. And to talk on the topic of being an avid learner, I have the honor and privilege of hosting two incredible gentlemen today, Vivek Gambhir and Sunder Ramachandran. Vivek Gambhir brings over 30 years in transformative leadership across consumer goods, technology, consulting, and investing. A graduate of Harvard Business School, he has had the opportunity to contribute to diverse roles, including being part of the founding team of Bain & Co. India, Managing Director of Godrej Consumer Products, and CEO of Boat Lifestyle. In addition to serving on several boards, Vivek is currently a venture partner at Lightspeed India, where he focuses on supporting entrepreneurs and scaling businesses. Sunder Ramachandran brings over 20 years of diverse experience across healthcare, technology, and financial services, including a 5-year stint as an entrepreneur. He is currently Senior Vice President and Head of Transformation and Commercial Excellence for Emerging Markets at Dr. Reddy's Labs. Having previously served as Country Managing Director for Sri Lanka and the Maldives at GSK. Sundar has been writing on career development themes for over a decade, and his articles have featured in Economic Times, Hindu Business Line, Rediff.com, and Daily Financial Times. Vivek and Sundar have also co-authored a book titled Head Start, which is up for grabs now. I've read my copy and I'm thrilled because you're going to get massive insights in this podcast. So really, really excited to have Vivek and Sundar on this podcast. Hi, Vivek. Hi, Sundar. Welcome to the Learning Curve.
Thank you, Rajiv. Pleasure being here. Thank you so much for having us, and congratulations on all the wonderful work that you and KNOLSKAPE are doing.
Thank you. Thank you, Vivek.
Rajiv, thank you. Lovely to be on your platform, and it's been fabulous to see your journey over the years. So thank you for inviting us.
Thank you, Sundar. So before we move to the discussion, I have a quick rapid fire section for both of you. Are you both ready?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so Vivek, we'll go with you first. AI in learning, threat or enabler?
Enabler if used correctly.
One
threat
mistake.
if you don't get it right.
One mistake you're grateful for.
Switching jobs too early.
Okay, all right. And a historical figure you'd love to have lunch with and why?
Clearly Mahatma Gandhi. I think some of the principles in terms of how he has driven change, the simplicity of his messaging, and what a force of nature he was, clearly is very, very inspirational.
Yeah, and this is pre-social media, pre-internet, the ability to galvanize an entire nation.
Without social media, Rajiv, you nailed it, right? So just think
Yeah.
about what he managed to get done. I think, and his writings are even today. Each time I read some of his writings, I'm like, I can't believe that this was written 70, 80 years ago.
Absolutely right. And Sundar, over to you now. The weirdest leadership advice you've ever received?
Just keep your head under the hood and keep working hard, and you will get noticed.
Okay. And your mantra for continuous learning?
Well, experiment.
Okay. What's your go-to productivity hack?
Maximize early mornings.
Okay,
So
that's
win your
very
big
good.
battles in the first couple of hours.
Awesome. Are you part of the 5 a.m. club?
I am, but more for creating personal time for myself. So I don't do work at 5 a.m.
Awesome. Great. And one final question in this segment for both of you. Describe Head Start in one word.
It's a companion.
Thanks.
Yeah. Coach in your hand.
Okay, awesome. And having read the book, I can attest to the fact that you are right. It's a guide, it's a companion, and it's a personalized coach for you, right? With step by step kind of an approach to career building. So that was a wonderful rapid fire section. Thank you so much, Vivek and Sundar, for your answers. We shall now move to the discussion, right? I have a bunch of questions for you. Uh, Vivek, we'll start with you again. Can you share what being an avid learner truly means and why it's foundational to career success now?
Yeah, I think Rajiv, as you were also alluding to in the beginning, the ability to learn faster and better than others is not just an advantage anymore, but a necessity. We all know how quickly industries are morphing, new business models are emerging, and the impact of technology, whichever way it goes, could be very transformative. And what was relevant yesterday actually might be obsolete tomorrow. And so learning in some ways is no longer just a nice to have, but almost a lifeline.
Yeah,
And I remember, I think you had quoted Edward Deming in the book, which said that learning is not compulsory, neither is survival, which I thought was
right.
an amazing quote. And Rajiv, thank you for all your help on the book. But I think being an admin learner today truly means that it's so important to know what to learn, really map your journey, and actually have a clear and a deliberate plan to ensure that each of our skills just remains relevant, so that we are all battle tested regardless of what happens to change and uncertainty in the world.
Awesome. Yeah, there's so much that's changing in the context around us. So, in fact, this is the other line that I usually talk about. My team is bored to death um, because I overuse this a lot. But to me, it seems like, machines are learning. The real question is, are you? Are all of us learning, right? So yes, change is upon us, and rapid change that too. Game is changing, and the only superpower that's left, I think, with humans is, are we able to learn continuously? So it's a great start. Thank you for that. So Sundar, over to you. In Head Start, you emphasize creating a learning SIP. I found that very intriguing. Could you elaborate on how young professionals can practically invest in their learning despite demanding work schedules?
No, absolutely. I think the whole idea behind learning SIP, Rajiv, was just building on the principle of compounding, right? And one could argue that applies to every aspect of life. I think the SIP becomes super important because one of the things we've seen in our careers, and we say this in the book as well, is learning is way too important to be left to your learning and development team or to your HR team, right? So you've got to take the wheels. And while that may sound a little esoteric, you can actually make it tactical by saying, hey, not only am I going to take the wheels, I'm going to resource myself to be able to do what I need to do to improve. This could be in the form of, hey, buying books on a topic that you want to read about. This could be traveling to attend a conference, doing a seminar, doing a MOOC on one of these online platforms. And not always what you may want to learn may be super aligned with what your organization may want to invest in. And in moments like that, the last thing you want is to trade off and say, hey, you know what? My company, my boss is not willing to sign off on this. So I'm just going to put this on the back burner. I mean, that'll be such a shame. So why don't you just invest a small amount of money each month, park it out, and then 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, a year down the line, you actually realize now you're sitting on a learning corpus of sorts.
Yeah.
And the empowerment that that gives you to say, hey, you know what? I've got now the resources to actually go invest. And now there's no excuse, right? You've backed yourself up. So whatever your organization does for you almost becomes like a nice bonus. But you at any point in time, every year, are ready to invest. And, if you think in basic investment principles, I mean, look at any other asset class. We're reasonably confident this would give you the biggest ROI compared to anything else out there, even if you turn it into a financial value. So I think that's the whole idea of thinking about an SIP, just to not just empower yourself as a mindset, but also make sure that you put your money where your mouth is. You have the resources to go chase whatever you think may be appropriate for you.
Awesome. And I can see the relevance of that because in our traditional educational system, right? So you finish your degree program and then you get into your work and then your learning comes to a stop, right? And it's whatever you learn on the job is what you're exposed to, and then that's limited. In this changing world, we need to keep our horizons a little open. And there are very few people out there who think of themselves as a lifelong learner. Somehow, learning gets done when you are in your 20s, and after that, it's just work experience, right? So that model is getting challenged, and I'm really happy to see this concept from the investing world coming into the learning space as well, because you're investing in your own talent, in your own growth and development. So that's amazing. Uh, Vivek, in the book, you mentioned the importance of being a curiosity-driven learner. Can you give an example from your own career or someone else you admire who embodies this trait, and explain how it impacted them, professionally?
Yeah. And I think, Rajiv, as we all know, curiosity is probably one of the single most requirements for us to continue on this path of continuous learning. And in the book, we talk about an example of Tejas. It's a real example. The person did not want us to use his name, but Tejas is a young gentleman who went to one of the best universities in the world, uh, went and worked as an analyst, and then went to graduate school, and then after graduate school became a monk, for a year,
Yeah.
and then went into the investing space. And you were talking about the importance of investment. Again, in the investing space, the importance of learning is even more important in many ways, because you have to keep on extrapolating or discovering, what the future might hold, and almost be able to crystal gaze and take a forward view in terms of, what the world might look like 5 or 10 years down the road. And in the book, and I'll just read a couple of sentences in terms of Tejas' story to bring out this point. Uh, you know, Tejas says, look, technically, one doesn't have to do anything, including learning. This is not a diktat imprinted in the laws of the universe. I learn because it fundamentally brings joy. By virtue of it being intrinsic, the only goalpost I'm linking to is my self confidence and joy. My learning philosophy is 80% intrinsic, but 20% extrinsic. It has both elements. While learning provides a sense of joy, it usually only does so when one enters a state of flow. Very few will get out of bed just for the pure joy of learning. Most wake up for a practical purpose because they have goals or needs that are often tied to extrinsic reasons, a job promotion, a key project at work. As a result, I see extrinsic reasons as a fuel to get started, and I see intrinsic reasons as a way to keep going. And to me, I think this mixture of having the right intrinsic reasons and balancing it with the realities of extrinsic motivations is at the heart of, I think, both an amazing philosophy which a young 20 something year old taught Sundar and I about the importance of curiosity driven learning.
Awesome. What a brilliant story that is. Thanks for sharing that with us. So, what crossed my mind as you read those lines is Bruce Lee. So, I'm a big fan of Bruce Lee. He's written a book. He has a philosophy, right, which is called Be Water, My Friend. So, there is a 2 minute, 3 minute video of his, which often goes viral. So, when he talks about living from your essence, right, your true essence, which gets manifested in any domain that you are in, right? So he's talking about an inside out way of living, right? Obviously, you are interacting with the external world, you need to respond to different things, but there is a lot of stuff that is very inside out, like curiosity. These are meta skills, right? Curiosity, or the fact that you will commit to continuous learning. These are meta skills, really. So that story sort of brought that entire philosophy to my mind. Thanks for sharing that. And continuous learning often requires adapting to new technologies. Today, we live in a technology led world. In the context of this, Sundar, if you can comment on this, how do you see AI changing the learning landscape? And what skills should young professionals focus on acquiring today? And this gets asked every single time, especially graduating students. Every profession is getting rewired, every job role is getting rewired. So, what should I be learning today is a common question. Any thoughts
Yeah,
on that?
absolutely. And I mean, not just, I mean, that's a common question, but also it's a fairly foundational question, and you've got to be answering that at regular intervals, right? I think just in terms of how is AI aiding learning, as all of us who work in large enterprises know, I mean, it's doing everything from curating resources to giving you timely recommendations to providing you check-ins. I mean, we're now using, as you know, Rajiv, based on our conversations earlier. I mean, in the world I am in healthcare, we're actually using AI to stimulate managerial coaching as well.
Right.
Because there's only so much capacity to coach an individual has. The moment you have 10, 12, 15, 20 people, I mean, your time's at a premium, right? So I think just in terms of the ability to surface interesting learnings, the ability to make recommendations, and the ability to coach you in the moment, right, in as part of the day in your life, I think those are things that are getting really, really sharp and better with AI, and I think that's going to keep improving. In terms of how should professionals prioritize, one of the models that we're talking about in the book is, just this simple model of having a learning plan
Yeah.
and thinking about a combination of a technical skill that fuels your operational context for today and a behavioral skill, which typically tends to be slightly more longitudinal.
Yeah.
One of the things we strongly believe is, I mean, the tech landscape, that stack is going to keep evolving. I mean,
Yeah.
very difficult for even people who use these things on a day-to-day basis like us to say what's the outer 5 years going to look like. So our recommendation is, don't confuse yourself too much with what's going to be hot in 2030. Think about your job, think about your role today, and then probably think on the adjacencies, maybe like one step ahead. That I think is a reasonably pragmatic way of almost foolproofing yourself so that you're not left behind when things change, and the change is not too sudden, it doesn't feel too sudden to you. I think that's one. But always combine it with a real world skill set, a longitudinal skill set, building relationships, deep listening, ability to lead, right? Joining the dots. I think these are hot today and they'll continue to be hot even 5 years down the line. One could say that with a reasonable amount of confidence. So if you think like that, each year or every 6 monthly cycle, you're almost sort of curating a bunch of skill sets for you, right? And then over a 5 year period, you've actually accumulated and you've gotten better at three or four good foundational life skills, soft skills, as we like to call it, and also the other technical operational skill sets that may be relevant in whatever context you operate in. So that's really what we are recommending as part of building that learning plan. And I think that's a key that all of us should be mindful of as we move forward.
Awesome. Two thoughts came to my mind as I was listening to this. One is a TED talk that I had listened to many years ago by this person called Joy Ito. He, I think, was or is MIT Sloan's lab. They're cutting edge when it comes to technology. Where he said, there are a lot of people who are out there, especially on LinkedIn, who claim to be futurists. And he says that's overrated. Can we all become novists? Because everything is happening in the now. So that's one thought that came to my mind. Can we look at what's happening today? Because nobody knows 5 years down the road. Some of these technologies are exponential. You have no idea how that's going to take off. The other is the career model as well that organizations are talking about today. Some are referring to this as the T-shaped model, right? Where you have some horizontal skills, but you have deep domain expertise in at least one area. Others are calling it the comb model, where it's not just one domain that you're going deep into, but multiple domains, but keeping the adjacencies as a connecting thread, like the longitudinal part that you were speaking about. So that's awesome. One of the things that we are realizing as we work with large multinationals on building future-ready skills is there is a lot of interest in futurizing work. We talk about the three W's of future of work, right? Work, worker, and the workplace. When it comes to the work, there is there is this movement towards futurizing. So anything that has got Gen AI on it gets funded, right? But when it comes to doing things for the employee or for the culture of the organization, right? Things are a little behind. For example, psychological safety. Introducing AI is great, but then are people feeling safe about it, right? Or are people learning how to get themselves enabled? There's a lot of work that I feel remains to be done. So in that context, how do you think leaders can humanize their approach to workforce development? Right now, it seems like a mad rush towards anything that's AI, but how do we bring about that balance?
I think there's so much, I think, insights, Rajiv, in the comment that you've talked about. Um, and in some ways, the approach does also require whether you call it the novice approach or the beginner's mindset, right? And the first step I would suggest is for leaders to put the oxygen mask on themselves first, right? And first of all, figure out in terms of, what they need to do to be able to at least feel much more psychologically safe in an organization. If leaders are not feeling safe, if leaders are not growing, if leaders don't find enough career opportunities, there's no way they can try and deliver on something which they don't feel. So ultimately, it in some ways has to start with, being able to humanize work for leaders and for them to actually feel confident in the contract with companies, and then use that to essentially role model the right behaviors. Uh, we all know the significant challenges that are being faced in the world today with the uncertainties. We know mental health is likely becoming the next big crisis for organizations. So the need to be able to humanize work, and it has to be human plus AI. I think it's not or. And how do we find a way to essentially use technology to our advantage to hopefully over time create more jobs? Some jobs will be lost, but how do we find a way to create more high quality jobs, better products to be able to solve the problems of the world? And in that sense, I think leaders really need to think about, what role will technology play? How do you help people actually end up managing this transition? How do we actually end up hand holding them? And to what Sundar was saying, whether technologies change, at the end of the day, things such as compassion, empathy, communication skills, transparency, respect, honesty, dignity, those are timeless values, I think, at the end of the day, Rajiv. And I think sometimes leaders forget the software here and end up focusing far more on the hardware. It's time to get back into really being what a true leader is all about, which is about, being able to really, drive these kinds of values and actually focus more on the software. In this whole debate about the hardware, I think leaders are actually forgetting the software.
I love that. Thank you so much for bringing that perspective.
And can I
And
just add to that,
yes,
Rajiv, if that's okay? Because, the analogy that I often use is the whole helicopter pilot analogy, right? I think um, gone are the times where you could get away by just being a pure play leader. I think now every leader, and I'm seeing this as an operator on a day-to-day environment, you've got to have a hip pocket skill. You
yeah,
can't say I'm just this pure Socratic leader who's going to ask interesting questions and provide some inspiration. I mean, practically, let's look at the world around us today. When we create sales structures as an example, we talk about, well, you got to have enough quota carrying leaders. You can't just say, just accumulation of numbers that my teams deliver. Now I've got to take personal accountability for some results as well. So I think that ability to the analogy of the helicopter pilot, which is you can't just keep flying like an airline pilot at a consistent altitude, right? Your ability to land at will and then take off quickly. So the whole zoom in, zoom out, be an operator, roll up your sleeves, get the job done, and then also be this value creator, scaffolder, and inspiration provider. I think that combination is what we're going to. So it's not going to be either or. Like Vivek said, we will have to index as much on building up skills, things that we are known for, what we can deliver value to the enterprise for, and then at the same time have that ability to take people along, create an inspiring vision. So if you index on any one end of the spectrum, I think you'll be less competitive as you move forward. So
Yeah, makes total sense. Thanks for bringing that perspective to the table. So, on that note, there is an element of humanization that's there in our learning process, and that's about networking, right? We are connected to other people on LinkedIn or other social media platforms or even offline networks. I feel that's often overlooked as a learning tool, right? The more AI and learning paths get curated, we tend to think of learning as this lonesome experience that I have with a computer. But there is a network around us. How can building a learning network or a tribe or a brain trust, if you will, right, benefit career growth of individuals or boost the career growth? And any strategies you can recommend for expanding one's network, especially in the early stages of one's career?
And I think in the book, one of the individuals who's shared his story, Raghubir, who worked closely with Sunder, has this, amazing one line which says, "Your network is your net worth." Right. And that's, for both Sundar and I, that's always been one of those things which is very, very memorable in some ways. Right. And Rajiv, you're absolutely right, particularly for young professionals. They really underestimate the importance of networking and even their personal brand because they think, oh, it's only meant for senior leaders. But the reality is that it's so important to start cultivating and building a learning network from as early as possible. And your learning network can be both internal and external. There are obviously the usual suspects, which are about taking training courses. Today, thanks to various MOOCs that are available, you can get some of the best courses in the world for just a few thousand rupees. And that's how I think access has gotten democratized, I think, in some ways. So there's a huge amount of courses that are available. Sundar talked about the importance of a learning plan. But beyond just access to courses, there are executive education programs for people. They can consider advanced degrees as well. Those are the usual suspects. But beyond that, also, as we look at a learning network, there are other things which people actually end up underestimating the power of. Internally, one very important way to build a learning network is to actually sign up for stretch assignments, right? Raising your hand, volunteering. We talk in the book about actually learning a skill, offering to do a brown bag session or a seminar internally to be able to share your knowledge. The more you are willing to share, the more you find accountability partners, the easier it actually becomes to be able to actually learn. So I think the ability to look at stretch assignments, sign up, share, your knowledge is a great way internally. Externally, I think, it's important to again attend conferences, uh, uh, build very strong peer networks. Peer networks can be both internal as external. People should be more proactive about finding the right kinds of mentors and coaches. And so in the book, we advocate this idea of, creating a portfolio. There are many options available. I think it's important for individuals to figure out what options work for them. But within this portfolio, whether it's internal networks or external networks, lots and lots of options are there. But people have to seriously commit to actually wanting to learn. There is no lack of available, but if you're not really committed to creating a learning plan and actually pursuing it, then it just becomes something on a sheet of paper.
Awesome. I love that. So I have a follow-on question to both of you, right? I think in this current generation of new, employees that are getting into the workforce, um, they are digital natives, right? They are exposed to social media and mobile phones much earlier in life, and distraction is part of life, right? For us, from a different generation, and for the new ones coming in as well. What are some recommendations that you have in the spirit of networking? One can get lost and get distracted as well, right? Anything that you want to say about How can young professionals overcome distractions?
Yeah, I think, one of the sections in our book is on this whole concept of being the marathon runner, right? We're just playing the long game. And the reason I brought this up in this context is because often the whole distraction and the scrolling phenomenon is associated with this FOMO, right? I've got to see that notification now. I've got to check every hour because am I missing out on something really important, right? And what is the impact, therefore? Is there a price I'm going to end up paying? I think the whole idea of, thinking more long term at least gives you that flexibility in your own mind to say it's all right. I mean, I can focus on what's important and I can allocate a chunk of time where I can come back and, give myself the room to get distracted. So, so to say, I think that's number one. The number two factor is the pressure, right? I mean, you spoke about LinkedIn and social platforms earlier. I think one of the biggest reasons why we see a lot of people get lost is because they're trying to, and I made this mistake myself when I started out. We're all trying to be thought leaders with the word go.
Right.
Yeah, because everybody around you seems to be sharing something really profound. Every failure is being turned into some sort of a reflective lesson, and there's so much of advisory. So you come onto these platforms trying to build a network, and there's so much pressure to say, how do I really sound insightful, smart, wise, da da da, right? That's a tough place to start. So our recommendation is, hey, you know what? Can you just be an opinion seeker? Being a thought leader is difficult, but being an opinion seeker is easy. Saying something really cool is difficult. Asking a simple question is easy. So take the path of least resistance, right? So when you're trying to think networks, building relationships, a good place to start would be just ask, right? Ask the question. I think that's just an easy way to sort of, build fluency. And then as you find your voice, as you build repository of know-how, as you gain experiences, you'll have enough to share as well eventually. So that sort of balances it out. It also gives the young professionals perspective to say it's all right. I mean, you don't need to have figured all this out in year one. I think sometimes the whole 30, 60, 90 pressure that we put on people also creates some artificial expectations that you should have delivered everything in the 90-day time frame, right? Of course, we all know careers don't work like that. So I think just take a slightly longer perspective, take that pressure off to say, hey, do I need to get addicted to a certain platform or phone, and what's the frequency? Just compartmentalize and say there's work to be done. I'm going to give it my best shot, deliver that, and then of course have structured intervals during the day where you can attend to all the other social platforms and what's going on there.
Awesome. Vivek, anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, this is honestly something we all struggle with, right? Um, Technology is very seductive and it can be very entertaining as well. And before you realize, all of us would have wasted a lot of time on it. And I think we all have to remember that our time and energy are probably two of the most important resources that we have. And to the extent that we have some choice in terms of how we use it, becomes more and more important in a world where we are inundated with so many different kinds of options and choices. And so, at a personal level, it's something Rajiv, I've struggled with, but I've learned to start defining a few boundaries, and I'll just share a couple of those. So, for the first hour in the morning when I wake up, I don't look at technology at all. For the last 1 hour before I go to bed, I don't look at technology at all. I don't have notifications on, and then I put few minutes on my calendar after every hour or two to be able to look at emails and respond to messages. So I appreciate the need to be responsive, but I also learned how to draw certain boundaries. I also certain timers in terms of my usage on social media, so that at least it reminds me that I've exceeded my time for the day. Those are some of the same principles I've been encouraging my kids also to be able to do. We'll falter once in a while. Look, there will always be the situation where we will all make mistakes. The importance is, I think, is to actually have an internal feedback loop and be honest that, look, this is something we'll all end up, struggling with. But I think it's important to define certain guiding principles and certain boundaries, which works for each of us. I think for each of us, the answer will be very different. But I think given the pervasiveness of how technology is now coming into every aspect of our lives. There are lots of benefits to it, but I think what I'm struggling with, what I'm learning is to be able to try and find some ways to be able to leverage the benefits, but not get completely sucked into technology.
Wow. Okay. Awesome. I think both of you brought tremendously rich perspectives to this question on distraction, which I think is pertinent for all of us, right? How do we keep ourselves on track? And I guess clarity of purpose, helps us, right? We are always able to see the true north. Is this distraction helping me or taking me off my course? That was super rich. Thanks for adding these perspectives, both of you. And I want to ask this question. Do you have a sequel in mind after Head Start? The reason I ask is also, this common example comes to mind. Sachin Tendulkar and Vinod Kambli is often quoted, right? Both of them got great head starts. In fact, they were both partners, and they've scored enormous runs in their early years, but one took off, and the other did not. Right. So while Head Start is great, have you thought about how do people stay on track after the Head Start they get?
Yeah, no, as far as Head Start is concerned, clearly, I think it's day zero for us. So I think there's so much more work that is still there in front of us to spread the word, I think, Rajiv. And so I think our focus right now is to be able to see how best we can spread the idea of, helping professionals find ways to thrive. I think as we get deeper into this, as we continue speaking to wonderful leaders like you, lots of other professionals, that perhaps an idea of a sequel might emerge. So I don't think we'll say no to that. But at this stage, I don't think we've been able to come up with something which is concrete yet. So as they say in Hindi, abhi kahani abhi baki hai. So sorry
Totally.
for using Hindi here. So.
No worries. Awesome, great. So one of the other questions that I had is some of the things that we speak about learning being integral to growth or being a continuous learner is a superpower. We need to all acquire it and so on. Yet there is resistance to change, resistance to accepting that idea. So what actually comes in the way, right? Especially for young professionals and more so for senior leaders as well, because we all face this at various points in our careers. What mindset shifts are necessary to embrace this idea of change and lifelong learning? What needs to change here?
Yeah, I think Rajiv, one of the pieces that really helps is sort of creating some rituals around it, because this isn't seasonal. I mean, learning definitely is not seasonal, right? But typically, what happens is, think about it this way, right? In an organizational context, when do we start thinking of training, learning, and all of that? Usually, the best programs are reserved for the top talent. If you're sort of struggling, you're not going to be sent to an Ivy League business school for an exec education type of a program. That's not happening, right? So we're always thinking about learning, exposure, resources when we're on a high within a business or an organizational context. When you're on a high, the cycle that you're a part of, whether it's the business cycle, the product cycle, things are working in your favor, so you're learning anyway just by being part of that phase, right? So you're not as thoughtful, you're just taking the experiences. Where you really need learning is where things are not working out, when you're struggling, right? So just taking that seasonality out of it, and as a professional saying, hey, this is a ritual. Like I said, in the earlier piece of the conversation, like, having that SIP, having that learning plan. So I'm going to do this anyway. If I'm striking the ball out of the court, I'm having a fantastic year, I'll have a learning plan, I'll have a couple of things, I'm going to deliver on that. I'm having a bad quarter, I'm having a bad year, things are not working out, the environment's not playing to my favor, lot of headwinds, I'm still sticking to my learning plan. So if you just take the whole element of performance cycles out, this becomes a constant, this becomes a ritual that you're doing. It's almost like a work skill, a life skill. It's part of who you are. That's number one. The second thing I would say is, I think an error that, I mean, a mistake that I've made and learned from is, as you start spending more time in the enterprise environment, you realize personal learning is actually not personal. This isn't an academic endeavor anymore, right? So why are you learning is a fundamental question. You're learning to unlock value wherever you are. And what does that mean? Unlocking value for the business that you're a part of, unlocking value for the teams that you may have the privilege of leading, or the people that you work with. So you got to think of learning also as a slightly more social, non-personal context. You're not doing it only for yourself. You're doing it so that you can deliver more for the contract that you're in with the organization. You can show up better for people who you have the opportunity to lead. So if you think like that, the responsibility is, you can't just think about it as a selfish endeavor to say, I will keep getting better, therefore I'm doing it. You have to say, I'm going to keep getting better, and then people around me are going to experience me better. The business is going to get more out of me, and that just makes it more valuable. And it also gives you a reason to stay the course versus just saying, I'm done, I know enough, good enough, right?
Yeah, and Rajiv, I think just to build on what Sundar is saying, I think Sundar's laid out very well the accountability each of us as individuals need to bring to learning, not just for ourselves, but for the overall organization agenda. Where I see a massive disconnect is in organizations between what they say and what they actually do. If you talk to any organization, they'll tell you, one of our most important priorities is for our people to keep on learning, right? And learning is a very, very important priority. Ask organizations how much of their budget are they spending in learning, right? The number, Rajiv, you know this better than us, is probably 0.1 or 0.2% of revenue in probably the most progressive organizations. So organizations end up saying, we want our people to keep on learning, but they don't put their money where their mouth is. And then unfortunately, then they have to go out and then recruit fresh talent at almost 1.5, 2x of what the current talent actually ends up costing. So I don't know how to solve this situation, but I see a massive, massive disconnect between people saying that learning is important at an organizational level, but very little of actual focus is being given to learning. And that's why you start seeing all this frustrations that you are seeing within organizations. People keep on asking about career opportunities, they keep on asking about promotions. Those are all symptoms that I think employees are getting frustrated because you're not learning enough. When you don't learn enough, then you start wondering about your career, you start wondering about your compensation, and you start wondering about your promotions far more, I think.
Awesome. I could relate to what you just said because earlier on you referenced flow as a concept, right? Most employees who are constantly in the state of flow at work get intrinsically motivated. Some of these other things don't matter as much. And I think the state of flow happens when you are in a deep learning state, right? Where something is challenging and we're all, hovering somewhere between stress and boredom, right? So in that space is where you're getting the state of flow. And if your job provides that opportunity to continuously learn new things and you're getting challenged all the time, right? So that's the best intrinsic motivation people can get. So I could completely relate to what you just mentioned. So I've just a couple more questions. Um, when you think about future of work and future of learning, to be specific, what comes to your mind?
Well, I think one of the futurists said this, right? The future of work is already here. It's just not evenly distributed, perhaps, right? So I think what I think about the future of work, I'm actually not a big fan of that semantic and narrative, because in my mind, that almost sort of gives you an alibi to procrastinate the inevitable, right? And say, oh, it's a future, right? It's not here, so I'll prepare for it later, right? I think the changes are around us. I mean, just in terms of how we're consuming information, entertainment, learning, all of that. So all of that will translate going forward. I think given how much our consumer experiences are saying changing, I think that spillover in the enterprise context would be faster than what we've seen in the last 10 years. So I think already we are seeing it, right? Just learning, people are comparing the experience. If my learning management system or my learning app is not able to give a consumer class experience that people are used to on a Coursera or LinkedIn Learning, I mean, I've lost my user even before I get them onboarded, right? So I think Therefore, whatever we are trying to do within the enterprise has to be best in class, consumer class for this to be relevant. I think that you still see a gap. I mean, how we all know, all of us who've worked in large organizations, how difficult it is to even book a international ticket, right? And how
Right.
many steps and how many processes and friction, and then most of us end up delegating that to an executive assistant type of a thing, right? I think just an example of enterprise systems are still fairly broken. So I think, how do we make sure that in the future all the experiences are as seamless as we experience in our personal space, right? I think that'll be one. I think the imperative for learning, more and more organizations will start embracing this idea that whatever they do is not going to be enough. So I see a future where almost at the time of getting an employee on board, you will be very explicit in your contracting to say, this is how you will think about learning. These are investments that you will make, and
Right.
some sort of a partnership model, versus saying, hey, you know what, now I own you up. It's my job now to train you, coach you, teach
Right.
you, make you ready, da da da. I think that transfer of ownership will happen. So anyone who comes in will come in with that much more accountability, that it's on me, and if I'm failing to do my part, there is a consequence.
Awesome. Vivek, anything you'd like to say on this?
Yeah, no, I think Sundar's covered it very well. I think what I'll say is that the future of work will be a lot more hybrid. It will be a lot more collaborative. It will be a lot more uncertain. It will be more dynamic, more experimental, and hopefully more human.
Ah, well said. So, as AI becomes more human, I think the real question also is, will humans become more human? I often think about that. So, I'm going to end this wonderful conversation with this final question. What's your personal superpower, and what new things have you learned in the recent past? Something that you learned and you said, aha.
Uh, I don't know if it's superpower, but I think generally what's given me results is just the ability to try out things, experiment. So I'm not worried about something not working out. So if I have enough conviction, I'll go give it a shot. Or, sometimes it works out, many times it doesn't, and that's all right. So just that ability to not overthink and try out is something that I've seen generally give me decent results. Something that I've tried, I've actually been so with the process of writing the book and trying to put the word out, I've been experimenting quite a lot with how the social platforms work, how the algorithms work, why is certain content doing better than others, and that's given me an aha. I mean, I've never thought about it in a very deliberate fashion, but now I'm getting into the nuts and bolts of, well, how probably the creator economy works, how content creators think about what they do, and it's fascinating. I mean, there's so much of structure and science behind that. Whatever looks so spontaneous on social platforms, it's also well prepped and thought through. So it's been fascinating to just look into some of that and see what of it we can learn and improve on as we go on this journey forward.
Awesome. Vivek.
Yeah, for me, I'm not sure if it's a superpower, but I'm certainly learning and trying very hard to be more compassionate. Which is about actually using empathy and tough love and
Mm-hmm.
problem solving and trying to combine these things together in terms of what actually, compassion actually means and how can I be a more compassionate person. In terms of my learning, again, I think, Rajiv, what I've been very intrigued by is the role of AI and how AI can be harnessed for the individual and the collective good of people, and what the implications can be if we don't end up harnessing AI the right way. So, to me, that's where I'm spending a lot of my personal time as far as my individual learning is concerned, just to be able to better understand, both the power and the potential risks with AI.
Awesome. So good to hear that. Thank you so much, Vivek and Sundar, for this wonderful conversation. The insights and experiences you've shared in this discussion is something that I'm sure the viewers and listeners will find great value in and learning. They'll take a lot of learning from this. Thank you so much for doing this. And thanks to all our viewers and listeners for tuning in to the Learning Curve. We shall be back in the next episode with another great personality or personalities and insights on making organizations, leaders, and the entire workforce ready for the future. Until next time, Take care and goodbye.